The screech of tires on asphalt isn't exactly the soundtrack you want for a quiet Sunday morning. But there it was again, that obnoxious white BMW pulling into my driveway like it had every right to be there. Karen didn't honk. She didn't knock. She just parked, blocking me in completely, and strutted off toward the neighborhood clubhouse like she owned not just her house, but mine too. The first time I thought it was an honest mistake. The second time I figured she was testing boundaries. By the third, I knew exactly what this was. A power play. And if there's one thing I learned in 20 years of running my own business, it's that bullies only understand one language: consequences. What Karen didn't know was that while she was busy playing neighborhood dictator, I was busy planning a lesson she'd never forget. Before we get into it, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare like this one. When I bought my house in Meadowbrook Estates, I thought I'd found paradise. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, and a homeowners association that promised to keep property values high and the neighborhood pristine. The brochure made it sound like a dream. What they didn't mention was that the HOA president, Karen, ran the place like her personal fiefdom. She had rules for everything. The exact shade of beige your house could be, how many potted plants you could have on your porch, whether your mailbox flag could face left or right. I'm not exaggerating. The woman once fined a neighbor because his garden gnome was 3 inches taller than regulation height. 3 inches. But I kept my head down at first, paid my dues, followed the rules, and minded my own business. My driveway was at the end of a cul-de-sac, wide and paved, leading up to my 2-car garage. I'd specifically chosen this house because of that driveway. After years of apartment living and street parking nightmares, having my own space felt like a luxury. Then Karen discovered it. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find her BMW parked right across the bottom of my driveway, completely blocking my exit. I had a meeting across town in an hour. I threw on clothes, grabbed my keys, and headed out, only to stop dead when I saw her car sitting there like a roadblock. I walked over to the clubhouse where I'd seen her heading. Sure enough, there she was, holding court at some HOA committee meeting, clipboard in hand, barking orders at volunteers setting up for a bake sale. "Excuse me," I said politely, "you're blocking my driveway." She glanced up, barely acknowledging me. "Oh, I'll move it later. I'm busy right now." I blinked. "Later, I have somewhere to be." She waved her hand dismissively. "The bake sale starts in 20 minutes. I can't leave right now. You'll have to wait." My jaw tightened. "Ma'am, that's my driveway. You can't just park there." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic. It's only for an hour or so. Community events take priority." Then she turned her back on me and continued talking to her committee like I didn't exist. I stood there, stunned. This woman had just told me to my face that her bake sale was more important than my personal property. I wanted to argue, to demand she move her car immediately, but something told me it wouldn't matter. Karen wasn't the type to listen to reason. So I swallowed my anger, called an Uber, and made it to my meeting barely on time. When I got home 3 hours later, her car was gone. I figured that was the end of it. A rude, entitled moment that wouldn't repeat itself. I was wrong. The next weekend, it happened again. I came out Saturday morning to run errands, and there it was. That same white BMW parked across my driveway like a barricade. This time, I didn't bother going to find her. I called her cell, the number listed on the HOA contact sheet. She answered on the 3rd ring. "What?" she snapped. "You're blocking my driveway again," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I need you to move your car." There was a pause, then a sigh so exaggerated I could practically see her rolling her eyes. "I'm hosting a yoga class at the clubhouse. I'll move it when I'm done." "That's not acceptable," I said firmly. "You can't keep blocking my driveway. It's private property." She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, please. You live in an HOA. Nothing here is truly private. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a class to teach." And she hung up. I stared at my phone, blood boiling. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't ignorance. This was deliberate. Karen was asserting dominance, showing me that in her world my property rights meant nothing. And judging by the smug tone in her voice, she enjoyed it. Over the next month, it became a pattern. At least once a week, sometimes twice, I'd find her car blocking my driveway. Sometimes it was for HOA meetings. Other times it was garden club luncheons or book club gatherings. Once she parked there just because the clubhouse lot was full and she didn't feel like walking an extra 30 feet. Each time I'd call or text. Each time she'd brush me off with some excuse about community priorities or HOA business. And each time I felt my patience wearing thinner. I tried talking to other neighbors, hoping someone would back me up or at least commiserate. Most of them just shook their heads sympathetically. "That's Karen," one said. "She does whatever she wants. You can't fight her." Another neighbor, an older man named Greg, pulled me aside one afternoon. "Listen," he said quietly. "I've lived here 15 years. Karen's been president for 10 of them. She's untouchable. She's got the board in her pocket, half the neighborhood scared of her fines and the other half too tired to care. My advice? Let it go." But I couldn't let it go. This was my home. My driveway, my property. And every time she parked there, it felt like she was planting a flag claiming ownership over something that wasn't hers. One evening, I decided to escalate. I went to an HOA board meeting, signed up for public comment, and stood up to address the room. Karen sat at the head table, flanked by two other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I kept my tone professional. I'd like to address a recurring issue, I began. The HOA president has been repeatedly parking in my driveway without permission, blocking my access. I'm requesting that this behavior stop immediately. Karen didn't even look up from her notes. Your driveway, she said coolly, or the community's driveway? I frowned. It's my driveway. It's on my property. She finally met my eyes, her expression dripping with condescension. According to HOA bylaws, all driveways in Meadowbrook Estates are subject to temporary use for community purposes when necessary. I felt my stomach drop. That's not in the bylaws, I said. I've read them cover to cover. She smiled. Perhaps you missed the addendum. It was added 3 years ago. I'll email you a copy. The meeting moved on and I sat there fuming. When I got home, I pulled up the bylaws on my laptop and searched every page. There was no addendum. No clause about community use of private driveways. Karen had lied. Right there in front of witnesses, she'd made up a rule to justify her behavior. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with someone who could be reasoned with. Karen didn't care about rules or fairness. She cared about power, and she'd lie, cheat, and manipulate to keep it. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday morning, and I had a job interview, not just any interview. This was for a position I'd been chasing for months, a career-defining opportunity that could change everything. I'd laid out my suit the night before, prepped my portfolio, and set 3 alarms to make sure I'd leave early. I walked out my front door at 7:30, coffee in hand, ready to conquer the day. And there it was, Karen's BMW, parked across my driveway. Again, my heart sank. I checked my watch. If I left right now, I'd barely make it on time, but I couldn't leave. I was trapped. I called her, no answer. I texted, no response. I ran to the clubhouse, locked. I asked a neighbor if they'd seen her. She's out of town, they said. Took her daughter to some college tour. Won't be back until tonight. I stood there, disbelief washing over me. She'd left her car blocking my driveway and then left town. For a moment, I considered calling a tow truck right then and there. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear of retaliation. Maybe it was the ingrained belief that you don't make waves in your own neighborhood. Whatever it was, I didn't call. Instead, I called the company, explained the situation, and rescheduled the interview. They were understanding, but I could hear the disappointment in the recruiter's voice. That opportunity slipped through my fingers because of Karen's arrogance. That night, sitting on my couch, staring at my blocked driveway through the window, something shifted inside me. I was done being polite, done being patient. Done letting this woman walk all over me. If Karen wanted to play games, fine, but she was about to learn that I didn't play to lose. I spent the next few days researching. I called the local police non-emergency line and asked about parking enforcement on private property. They told me that if someone was blocking my driveway, I had every right to have the vehicle towed at the owner's expense. I didn't need permission. I didn't need a warning. I just needed to call a tow company. Next, I called 3 different towing services and explained the situation. 2 of them hesitated, nervous about HOA drama. But the third, a gruff-voiced man named Eddie, laughed. An HOA president blocking your driveway? Oh, I'd love to tow that. You just give me a call next time it happens. I also installed a security camera above my garage, angled perfectly to capture my driveway. If Karen tried to claim I was harassing her or making false accusations, I'd have video proof of every single time she blocked me in. Then I waited. It didn't take long. The following Saturday, I woke up and glanced out my window. There it was. Karen's white BMW parked diagonally across my driveway like she was daring me to do something about it. I smiled. Game on. I grabbed my phone and called Eddie. Got a car blocking my driveway, I said. Same address we talked about. He chuckled. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While I waited, I made myself a pot of coffee, sat on my porch, and watched the morning sun climb over the rooftops. Neighbors walked their dogs. Kids rode bikes down the street. It was a perfect, peaceful morning, and I was about to make it unforgettable. Eddie's tow truck rumbled into the cul-de-sac right on schedule, a massive red and white beast with a hydraulic lift and enough chains to haul a tank. He stepped out, a burly man with a gray beard and a baseball cap, and grinned at me. "This the one?" he asked, nodding toward the BMW. "That's the one," I confirmed. He walked around it, checking the plates, taking photos for his records. Then he got to work. The whole neighborhood seemed to pause. Curtains twitched. Doors opened. People stepped onto their porches, coffee mugs in hand, watching as Eddie hooked the BMW's front wheels onto the lift. The hydraulic whine echoed down the street, a mechanical symphony of justice. Within minutes, Karen's car was suspended in the air, rear wheels dangling helplessly. Just as Eddie was securing the chains, I heard a shriek. Karen came sprinting down the street, still in her yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, waving her arms like she was trying to flag down a rescue helicopter. "Stop!" she screamed. "Stop right now!" Eddie glanced at me. I nodded. He kept working. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen yelled, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. "That's my car." Towing it, Eddie said calmly, not even looking up. "You can't do that. This is private property." "Exactly," I said, stepping off my porch. "My private property, and you're blocking my driveway." Her face turned red. "I'll have you arrested. This is theft." Eddie finally looked at her, unimpressed. "Ma'am, blocking someone's driveway is illegal. The owner has every right to tow your vehicle. You'll get it back once you pay the fees." "Fees?" she sputtered. "What fees?" "Towing fee, storage fee, and a release fee," Eddie rattled off. "Comes out to about $350. Plus $50 a day if you don't pick it up within 48 hours. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. By now, a crowd had gathered. At least a dozen neighbors stood watching, some recording on their phones. I saw Greg, the older man who'd warned me not to fight her, grinning from ear to ear. "This is outrageous." Karen shouted, turning to the crowd as if they'd rally to her defense. "He can't do this." But no one moved. No one spoke up for her. A few people even chuckled. One neighbor whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "About time someone stood up to her." Karen's eyes darted around, searching for allies and finding none. Her face crumpled, a mix of rage and humiliation. "You'll regret this," she hissed at me. "The HOA will fine you into oblivion." I shrugged. "Go ahead. I've got video proof of every time you've blocked my driveway. I'm happy to show it to a judge." Her jaw clenched. She turned back to Eddie, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please, just put it down. I'll move it right now." "Too late," Eddie said, locking the final chain into place. "Once it's hooked, it's going to the lot. You want it back, you know where to find me." And with that, he climbed into the cab, fired up the engine, and drove off, Karen's BMW swinging gently behind him like a trophy. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen stood in the middle of the street, arms limp at her sides, staring at the empty space where her car had been. Then slowly, she turned to face me. Her eyes were filled with a fury I'd never seen before, but underneath it, I saw something else. Fear. For the first time, Karen realized she wasn't untouchable. I gave her a small, polite smile. "Have a great day, Karen." Then I walked back into my house, closing the door behind me. Through the window, I watched as she stood there for another minute before finally storming off, her heels clicking furiously against the pavement. The crowd dispersed, murmuring and laughing, and the neighborhood returned to its peaceful Saturday morning routine. But the fallout was just beginning. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing. Texts from neighbors, some congratulating me, others warning me that Karen was on the warpath. One message stood out from Greg. "Best thing I've seen in years." She had it coming. That afternoon, I got an email from the HOA. Subject line, "Violation Notice." I opened it already knowing what I'd find. Sure enough, Karen had issued me a formal violation for creating a public disturbance and damaging community relations. The fine, $500. I laughed out loud. She was retaliating, just like I knew she would. But I wasn't worried. I had my camera footage, my call logs, and a paper trail showing months of her blocking my driveway. If she wanted to escalate this, I was ready. The next day, I received another email. This one wasn't from Karen. It was from two other board members, both of whom I'd never interacted with before. "We'd like to speak with you privately," it read. "Can we meet tomorrow evening?" Curious, I agreed. The meeting took place at a quiet coffee shop outside the neighborhood. The two board members, a middle-aged woman named Linda and a younger man named Tom, sat across from me looking uncomfortable. "We want to apologize," Linda began, "for Karen's behavior. We've been aware of her tendencies for a while now, but we didn't realize it had gotten this bad." Tom nodded. "She's been abusing her position, blocking your driveway, issuing bogus fines, lying about bylaws. It's unacceptable." I leaned back, surprised. "So what are you going to do about it?" Linda sighed. "We're calling for a vote to remove her as president, but we need support from homeowners. If you're willing to share your evidence, your videos, your documentation, it would help our case." I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." Over the next week, I compiled everything. Videos of Karen's car blocking my driveway, timestamps, text messages, emails, and even the fake bylaw she'd cited. I handed it all over to Linda and Tom, who promised to present it at the next board meeting. Word spread quickly. Neighbors who'd been silent for years suddenly found their voices. Stories poured out. Karen had fined one family for having the wrong shade of shutters. She'd threatened another with legal action over a vegetable garden. She'd even tried to ban someone's emotional support dog, claiming it violated pet size regulations. The board meeting was packed, standing room only. Karen sat at the head table, her face a mask of forced calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Linda stood and addressed the room. We're here tonight to discuss a vote of no confidence in our current HOA president. She proceeded to lay out the evidence piece by piece. The room was silent, every eye on Karen. When the video of her car being towed played on the projector, a few people clapped. By the time Linda finished, Karen's face was pale. She tried to defend herself, stammering about community priorities and misunderstandings, but her words fell flat. The vote was called. It wasn't even close. 15-3. Karen was removed as president, effective immediately. She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out without a word. The room erupted in applause. For the first time in years, Meadowbrook Estates felt like a real community, not a dictatorship. In the weeks that followed, things changed. The new board president, Linda, repealed several of Karen's more ridiculous rules. Fines were reviewed and many were dismissed. And my driveway, it stayed clear. Karen avoided me like the plague. I'd see her occasionally, driving past with her head down, no longer the queen of the neighborhood. She'd been humbled, and it showed. As for me, I finally had the peace I'd been searching for. My driveway was mine again. My home felt like my own. And every time I pulled into that driveway, I smiled, remembering the day I stood up to a bully and won. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about a parking spot. It was about boundaries, respect, and the courage to fight for what's right. People like Karen exist everywhere. They push and push, expecting you to fold. But the moment you stand firm, the moment you refuse to be intimidated, they crumble. So here's my advice. If someone's blocking your driveway, metaphorically or literally, don't just sit there and take it. Stand up. Document everything. Know your rights. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to call the tow truck. Because sometimes the only way to move forward is to remove the obstacle in your path. And trust me, watching that tow truck drive away with Karen's car swinging behind it, that was the sweetest victory I've ever tasted. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of HOA drama, petty revenge, and standing up to bullies. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to deal with someone like Karen? What did you do? I'd love to hear your stories.